Hello my beautiful friends, it's Amanda here and I'm doing a really fun tag challenge type of video today. Two of my absolute favorite people to watch here on YouTube just did this tag. They are not the original creators, but I originally watched Angelica and Elle, two channels I love to watch. I'm so happy I'm subscribed to. I'm happy to say that I also consider both of these women to be my friends. I just really like them in general, aside from liking their content. When I saw them come out with this video, they sort of did it in collaboration and I knew I wanted to try it out and put my own spin on it. Two other women, Lacey and Georgia, created this idea. So I'm gonna link all four of their videos in the description box. I watched all four videos. Everybody had different palettes, they chose different shades, and everybody took a different approach to this. So I thought it was really interesting and I highly recommend that you go and watch all those videos when you're done with this one. I really enjoyed watching them. The premise, as is probably pretty evident from the title at this point, is that you choose one absolute favorite shade from a palette. All the other videos I watched, they chose 20. I'm probably gonna do more like 12. I think that 12 shades is kind of my ideal number of shades for a palette, so I wanna see if I chose my favorites from 12 palettes, what would that favorites palette look like? So as I choose them, I will swatch them all together on my arm and then we'll get a whole color story and see what my favorites palette would be. You may or may not know this about me, but I am a palette fanatic. I'm a palette hoarder. I would not be surprised if I have more than 200 palettes. So the prospect of selecting 12 palettes for this video is a little bit daunting. I don't even think I could pick like top 12 favorites for my whole collection. Side note, does anybody know about any like palette support groups? I wish I was kidding. So to put my own spin on this video, I am gonna let my own Instagram feed choose which 12 palettes I'm gonna talk about today. For better or for worse, the first 12 palettes that are pictured on my Instagram are the 12 palettes that I'm gonna use. I should say the last 12. I'm just gonna put the posts up here so that you can see the photos that I'm referencing. I'm actually just about to post a picture as soon as I'm done filming this, so kind of looking into the future here, but I'm about to post this picture. It's of the Norvina palette, so that'll be the first palette that we talk about. Next, we have some swatches from the ColourPop and Kathleen Light's Zodiac palette, so that'll be my second palette. The very next photo is this one of 3 Lorac palettes. If you saw my video about the Lorac Pro 4, you know that Pro 3 and Pro 4 basically have the same shades in them. So I'm gonna just use the Unzipped Ocean Sunset and the Pro 4. We're gonna skip the Pro 3, it's pretty redundant. Next we have this Too Faced Just Peachy Mattes palette. Then this palette from ColourPop. This is the Fortune palette. Palette number 7 that appears here is the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. And this photo actually has an eyeshadow palette in it. It's kind of hiding back there, but this is the Too Faced Natural Eyes palette, the new one, the newest one. Palette number 9 is going to be the ColourPop Mar palette. I know it looks like the Soul palette's in here too, but it's actually just the box. My original Soul palette arrived broken, so technically there's no Soul palette in this picture, so we're just gonna go with the Mar palette. Palette number 10 is gonna be this NARS Atomic Blonde palette. Should we count that little quad? Should we count that as a palette? Let's do it. Let's make that little NARS quad palette number 11. That means that eyeshadow palette number 12 is also hiding in a Too Faced pic. What's up with that? In this photo, the Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons palette is hiding underneath some brushes and lipsticks and other good stuff there. So that'll be my 12th palette. I'm gonna go round all 12 of these palettes up and then we'll talk about my favorite shades in each one. Okay, I got my makeup wipes, I got my Coke Zero, I got my palettes, so it's time to dig in. I have a feeling it's gonna be really difficult for me to choose a favorite in a lot of these palettes. I didn't go through them beforehand and select my shades. I'm gonna go from a mixture of just my gut feeling and the shades that I have used the most. I have a feeling we're gonna see a lot of shimmers and a lot of warm neutrals, so who knows what these swatches are gonna turn out to look like. The first palette that I'm diving into is the Norvina palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. This is fairly new to my collection, but I am wearing it on my eyes today. I've had it for a while, swatched with it, played with it. When I look at this palette, I'm automatically looking at these purples, but when it comes to what I really want to put on my eyelids, this shade called Wild Child is just difficult for me not to use in every single eye look with this palette. So we're starting off with a bright shimmery pink. This one is Wild Child from the Norvina palette. Next we have the Zodiac palette from ColourPop in collaboration with Kathleen Lights. Another one that is very new to my collection, but I have been playing with it. I did do a whole swatch and review video on this one. I have the same sort of feeling here. When I look at this, I automatically look at this shade, the Pisces, this really bright teal blue-green shade. But when I'm gonna use this palette, I feel like I'm gonna grab this one called the Gemini. This is like a true gold, really soft, gorgeous metallic shade. So that's my favorite from this palette, the Gemini. Already all shimmers. What's new? Hopefully you're able to see these. I'll do a close-up. Ignore my mosquito bite. We'll just put some gold shimmer on my mosquito bite. Next up we have one of my favorite palettes. This is the Unzipped Ocean Sunset from Lorac. Such an underrated palette. I've used this one a ton. I really love it. I love to take this when I'm traveling because I can get so many different kinds of looks out of this one. This was in my best palettes of 2017. I really wish more people knew how awesome this palette was. Every time I use this palette, I end up grabbing for this mauvey pink matte shade. This is called Sundown. The Lorac mattes are just ridiculously good. They're so good, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm pretty sure that these palettes are being discontinued. If you can find any of them, definitely get them. They're so underrated and some of the best palettes just on the market in general. If you missed out, I'm sorry. I know there are still some of these floating around, but definitely get this palette. I don't say that a lot, but I'm saying it about this one. Now we have another Lorac palette. This is the Pro 4. I just did a video on this. In short, I don't really think you need to run out and get this one. And it's pretty easy for me to choose my favorite shade in this palette because I think there are only a couple truly interesting shades in here. I'm going for this shimmery pale red shade called Begonia. As far as all the Pro palettes go, this definitely is the shade that sets this one apart from the others. So that's an easy choice. This isn't as warm as I expected it to be yet. I'm sure we'll get there, but now we have the Just Peachy Mattes palette from Too Faced. You know I love my Too Faced palettes. I really enjoy all of these shades, but in this case, my favorite is this really bright corally peach shade called Peach Punch. I think this shade is so much fun to wear. It just makes me happy. So there is Peach Punch added to the mix. This is the Fortune palette from ColourPop. This is all warm brown, orange, purpley, just right up my alley. I feel like at the end, all my swatches together are gonna end up looking like this palette. My favorite shade in here is this one called Miser. As far as my collection goes, this is the most unique shade and it's what really sets this palette apart from other yummy warm palettes that I have. Miser is interesting because it looks purple in the pan, but once it's applied to the skin, it's actually a reddish peachy shade with a bunch of purple and blue glitters in it. It's kind of hard to see the shift on camera, but in person it's really intensely metallic-y, glittery, shifty goodness. Of course, this is the much loved Modern Renaissance palette, also from Anastasia Beverly Hills. I feel that this is such a cult favorite. A lot of people who disagree on palettes and makeup in general pretty much all agree that this palette is amazing. This has been in my collection for a long time and I've used it quite a bit, so I had a hard time choosing which shade is my favorite. I'm gonna go with Venetian Red. I think this is such a special shade. It's pinky, it's reddish, it's neutral, it's almost cool tone, but it's not quite. It has such a special texture. It's like a satin matte. So that one is Venetian Red. Next up is another long-loved palette, but this one has recently gotten a revamp. It's the Naturalized palette from Too Faced. Fun fact, the old school Naturalized palette in the cardboard packaging was my first ever eyeshadow palette. I have hit pan on a bunch of those shades, but my favorite is this one called Push Up. I love this color. This is like the go-to all over lid color. I could not imagine a more perfect eyeshadow. It's no contest. I really do enjoy a lot of these shades. Call me basic if you want to, but Push Up is my go-to. I feel like Wild Child's getting lost in the mix here, but it really is a super pink eyeshadow. This is the Mar palette from ColourPop, another one that I have a whole video on. This was in my July favorites, and in my favorites video, I talked about how much I love this just matte, warm tan shade. I keep reaching for this palette to use with other palettes if I just need a transition shade, because I love this shade so much, and I feel like this is the most basic, boring eyeshadow shade ever. And when it comes to this palette specifically, the shade in the center called Gridlock is like the shade that makes this palette work for me. I've actually been loving shimmery blue eyeshadows lately, and this one really does it for me. So I'm gonna betray this shade called Sorbet, and I'm gonna choose Gridlock because it's such a stunning shimmery blue. So that is Gridlock. We're getting down to the wire, only 3 palettes left. This is the Atomic Blonde palette. This was also in my July favorites. This and the Mar palette were all I used in the month of July. I like all of the shades in this palette. My least favorite is the easiest to choose because it's this one on the end called Galapagos. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, that's what it's called. The first 2 eyeshadow shades are so pretty. I always use them together, so it's kind of hard to choose one favorite. But if I was just gonna do one all over lid look, I'd go with a lighter shade. This shimmery gold called Icon. So pretty, so soft. This is just me if I was an eyeshadow. There we have Icon from the NARS Atomic Blonde palette. The second to last palette we're talking about is this little quad. This is the Singapore quad from the NARS Fall Color Collection. I like all of these shades once again, but this red satiny shade down here in the corner is really the standout. It's what makes this palette all work together. This looks like Venetian red. Slightly different finish, but it really looks like Venetian red. So there is that red shade from the NARS quad, the Singapore quad. This is another OG palette in my collection. My husband actually gave me this palette for Valentine's Day right after it launched, and I just love it and feel so sentimental towards it just for that reason. But it is also a super cute, really great quality, great smelling palette. Classic Too Faced. While I have just used the crap out of this shade called Molasses Chip, I've used that one quite a bit. My favorite shade to work with in this palette is this one called Bordeaux. It's a gorgeous like wine brown matte color, especially at the time when this palette came into my life and I didn't have a gajillion ridiculous amount of palettes like I do now. This is a shade that really helped me fall in love with reddish browns and just warm tones in general on my brown eyes. So my pick from the Too Faced Chocolate Bonbons palette is Bordeaux. This is my top 12 favorite shades from the last 12 palettes that I posted on Instagram. This is actually a lot more colorful than I expected it to be. I know that I added in that pop of blue, but we really have some like pink, mauve, peach, red, duochrome. Of course, I've still got a matte brown. Like I'm probably the only person that does this tag that will choose a matte brown and a bunch of different bronze and golds, but if this was a palette, I would totally buy this palette. So here they are, all of my favorite shades. I think that my favorite shades turned out a lot different than I thought they would. I was expecting them to be all warm brown and bronze shimmers, and It's actually a lot more exciting than I thought it was gonna be. I will link the other videos that I've seen from this tag down in the description box, so make sure you go check out those ladies' videos, show them some love, and a big shout out to Lacey in Georgia for creating this little challenge. I love things like this. This is like old school YouTube coming back, tags and challenges. I think they're so much fun. If you see any others going around that you think are interesting, let me know, because I really enjoy this kind of thing. Sometimes it's fun to just put aside reviewing and play with my makeup collection. I'm tagging all of you to do this, whether you make YouTube videos or post on Instagram. I'm tagging you to try this challenge, and make sure that you tag me and the other creators that I mentioned so that we can check out all of your pics. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye. I just wish that they had done some more interesting shades, but who am I? Warm, yummy, delicious. I said yummy and delicious, that's repetitive. It is yummy and delicious though. But whence it's applied, from whence it was applied. Maybe someday I'll admit to myself my true basic tendencies.